Echoes Between Us. Chapter 1. I had built a life that asked very little of me emotionally, and I had answered it faithfully. The days passed cleanly, without excess. When she returned, because that is what it was, a return, I felt not desire, but the far more unsettling sensation of being seen. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, tucked among catalogs and alumni appeals. It was thinner than the others, its envelope unmarked except for my name, typed and precise. I let it sit on the hall table while I took off my coat. I remember thinking, with real conviction, that whatever it contained could wait. It could not, of course. Things never can. I opened it standing up. There was no salutation. The sentences were short, almost careful, as if written by someone who had learned to conserve words. I don't know if you'll want to hear from me. I don't expect anything. I'm in town for a few days. If you're willing, I'd like to talk. Her name appeared only once, at the end, smaller than I remembered it. I read the letter twice, then folded it back into its envelope. The house was quiet in the way it always was by late afternoon, the radiators clicking faintly, the clock in the kitchen insisting on time. Nothing had changed, and yet I had the unmistakable sense that something irreversible had already occurred. I sat down. That felt important. For years I had believed this moment would be louder. I had imagined shock, or dread, or a sharp grief I could name. What I felt instead was a narrowing. The world seemed to draw inward, like a lens adjusting, bringing one thing into focus at the expense of all else. I said her name out loud, once, to test it. It still fit. I taught my last class of the day with unusual efficiency. The students noticed. They always did when I departed from routine. I spoke more softly, wrote less on the board, asked questions I didn't wait to hear answered. "Professor," one of them said as I gathered my notes, "is everything okay?" "Yes," I said, and meant it in the narrowest possible sense. "Everything is fine." I walked home instead of taking the bus. It was colder than I expected, the sky already darkening, the sidewalks slick with old snow. The city felt indifferent to me, which I found reassuring. On my desk, I placed the letter beside the phone. The symmetry was deliberate. I made tea. I washed the mug immediately after. I did not sit down again. I told myself I would wait until morning, that I would decide later with the benefit of sleep. This was a lie so small it barely registered as one. The phone rang at 7:43. I let it ring 3 times, because that seemed appropriate, and then I answered. "Hello," I said. "Daniel." Her voice had changed, but not as much as I would have predicted. It was lower, steadier, as if time had filed away the softer edges. Hearing it produced a sensation that was almost physical, a pressure behind the sternum I did not move to relieve. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up," she said. "I wasn't sure either." She laughed quietly. "That sounds like you." I closed my eyes. "Why are you here?" There it was. No greeting. No pleasantries. I had always been economical under pressure. "I didn't plan it," she said. "At least, not the way you're thinking. My sister moved east. I came to help her settle. I thought I could manage without seeing you. And I couldn't." I waited for the familiar surge of accusation, the catalog of things she had done and failed to do. It did not arrive. What came instead was an awareness of time, how much of it had passed, and how little of it remained. "You wrote," I said. "You didn't have to call." "I needed to hear your voice," she said. "I needed to know if it still did this." "Did what?" "Made me tell the truth." I sat down again, more carefully this time. "That's an unfair thing to say." "I know," she said. "I'm sorry." There was a pause, shared and unmistakable. We had always been good at silence. It was one of the reasons things had lasted as long as they did. "I can meet," I said finally. "Briefly." "Of course," she said too quickly. "Whatever you're comfortable with." We chose a cafe near campus, neutral ground. I told her Thursday. She said she would be there early. After the call, I stood and opened the window, though it was cold. The air felt necessary. I stayed there longer than I needed to, breathing deliberately, as if that might prevent something from happening. It did not. That night, sleep came in fragments. I dreamed of rooms I could not exit, of lectures interrupted by questions I could not answer. Once, I dreamed I was erasing a board that refused to be cleared, the chalk smearing into a gray film no matter how hard I pressed. I woke before dawn and did not try again. On Thursday, I arrived late. This was not accidental, though I told myself it was. The cafe was half full, the windows fogged, the tables too close together. She was sitting near the back, her coat draped over the chair opposite. She stood when she saw me. That, too, was unchanged. "Daniel," she said. "Margaret." We shook hands, briefly, as if we were strangers with a shared acquaintance. I noticed, with some surprise, that her hair had gone fully gray. It suited her. The thought felt intimate, and I set it aside. We ordered coffee. The barista asked if we wanted anything else. We said no, in unison, and exchanged a glance that lasted half a second too long. "I'm glad you came," she said, once we were seated. I said I would. "Yes," she said, "but you've always been good at saying things." I considered this. "You didn't come all this way to criticize my character." "No," she said. "I came to apologize." That stopped me. It should not have, but it did. "For what?" I asked. "For leaving the way I did," she said. "For not giving you the chance to be angry. For making a decision and calling it inevitability." I looked at my hands. They were steady. This seemed worth noting. "You did what you thought was necessary," I said. At the time." "At the time," she agreed. "But time doesn't absolve us. It just rearranges the evidence." I almost smiled. She had always been good with language. It was one of the ways we recognized each other. "I'm not sure what you're asking for now," I said. "I'm not asking," she said. "Not really. I just needed you to know that I remember it differently now." "Differently how?" She hesitated. This was new. Margaret had never hesitated. "I remember how afraid I was," she said, "and how little I admitted that fear had anything to do with you." The coffee arrived. Steam rose between us, briefly obscuring her face. I was grateful for the interruption. "You were offered something extraordinary," I said. "Anyone would have taken it." "Not anyone," she said. "You wouldn't have." "No," I said. "I wouldn't." We sat with that. The cafe noise pressed in around us. Cups clinking, chairs scraping, a burst of laughter from a nearby table. Life continuing, oblivious. "I'm retiring in the spring," I said, though I had not planned to tell her. "I've told almost no one." She looked at me closely. "How do you feel about that?" "Relieved," I said. "Uneasy." "Both." "That sounds right." "And you?" I asked. "What happens after your sister settles?" She took a breath. "I don't know. That's part of the problem." There it was again, the sensation of being addressed directly, without armor. I had forgotten how disarming that could be. "Margaret," I said carefully, "we are not young." She smiled. It was smaller than it used to be. "I'm aware." "There are limits," I said, "to what can be revisited." "Yes," she said, "but not to what can be understood." I did not answer. Outside, snow had begun to fall, light and undecided. "I should go," she said after a moment. I didn't want this to be too much. "It already is," I said, before I could stop myself. She stood, gathering her coat. "May I call you?" I considered the question. It felt weighted, ceremonial. "Yes," I said. "You may." She nodded, once, and then she was gone. I remained at the table long after my coffee had gone cold. When I finally stood, I felt unsteady, as if I had misjudged the ground. At home, the house felt altered, though nothing had moved. I sat in the chair by the window and watched the snow accumulate, thinking of all the ways a life can change without appearing to. My phone rang again, just once, then stopped. A message appeared moments later. "I forgot to say the most important thing," it read. "I'm not here by accident." I stared at the screen until it went dark. Only then did I understand that this was not an ending returning. It was a beginning, arriving late, and unwilling to be ignored. Chapter 2. The message stayed on my phone like a bruise you test with your thumb. I did not open it again. I did not delete it either. I set the phone face down on the table and went to bed, as if sleep were a kind of jurisdiction I could still claim. It did not work. I lay awake listening to the house perform its small, familiar sounds. Pipes contracting, wind in the trees, the muted authority of the clock. I had always trusted these noises. They suggested order, sequence, a world that knew how to proceed without me. Now they felt indifferent. By morning I had decided nothing. This, too, felt familiar. For years I had been praised for decisiveness, for clarity of thought. What no one mentioned was how often clarity arrived only after everything else had failed. I taught 2 classes that day. In the first, a discussion unraveled into something heated and oddly personal. A student accused another of bad faith. Someone laughed at the wrong moment. I watched it happen with the detached interest of a man observing weather from behind glass. "Let's pause," I said, "before we confuse volume with conviction." They quieted. A few nodded. Authority still worked when I asked it to. In the second class, no one spoke at all. Afterward, in my office, I sat staring at the shelves. The books had thinned over the years, volumes lent and never returned. Others donated during periodic fits of resolve. What remained were the ones that had refused to leave me. I wondered, briefly, which category Margaret belonged to. The phone rang just after noon. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message immediately, betraying myself in the smallest possible way. "Daniel," she said, "I'm sorry to intrude again. There's something I didn't say yesterday. Something I should have said first. I'll try again later." She hung up before I could imagine what the thing might be. This felt strategic, or considerate. The distinction was no longer clear to me. I ate lunch standing up. I answered emails with unnecessary thoroughness. I avoided the window. At 3, I left campus and walked without direction. The city had begun to thaw, the snow retreating into gutters, the air damp and expectant. I passed the building where she and I had first argued in earnest, though I did not register it consciously until I was already beyond it. Memory, I was learning, had become a physical reflex. I returned home and found another message waiting. "This is foolish," she said. "I sound like I'm auditioning for something. I just wanted to tell you that I'm not well. Not in any dramatic way, just honestly. And I didn't want you to think this was nostalgia or regret. It's neither." I sat down hard, the chair complaining beneath me. She had never spoken like that before. Margaret had always been careful with weakness, parceling it out only after the fact, once it had been resolved into narrative. To hear it raw, unframed, felt like an error in transmission. I called her back. She answered on the second ring. "Hello. You said you weren't well?" I said. There was no preamble left in me. "Yes." "What does that mean?" "It means I've been pretending something is temporary when it isn't." I closed my eyes. "Is this about your health?" "No," she said quickly. "Nothing like that." "Then what?" She hesitated again. The pause stretched, became its own answer. "Come walk with me," she said. "Please." It was raining lightly, the kind that barely registers as weather. We met at the river, a choice that felt deliberate but unspoken. She wore a hat I didn't recognize and a scarf that had once been mine. I did not comment on it. "You look tired," she said. "So do you." "Good," she said. "Then we're honest already." We began to walk. The water moved beside us, patient and opaque. "I didn't come back for you," she said. "Not originally." "I know." She glanced at me. "Do you?" "Yes." "Because it's not flattering," she said. "I came back because I couldn't stay where I was." And where was that? In a version of my life that had become theoretical. I considered this. "You'll have to be more precise." She smiled faintly. I was living as if the important parts were always about to begin. "That's not uncommon." "No," she said, "but it's dangerous." We walked in silence for a few steps. A cyclist passed us too closely. A dog strained at its leash. "I left my job," she said. This stopped me. I turned toward her. "When?" "In October." "And you didn't tell me because." "Because we weren't speaking," she said. "Because it felt irrelevant. Because I didn't want to hear your voice telling me I'd done the right thing." "Did you?" She shook her head. "I did the necessary thing." "Those are not the same." We reached the bend in the path where the river widened. The city skyline looked tentative from this angle, as if unsure of itself. "You said yesterday you wanted to apologize," I said. "Is this part of that?" "Yes," she said. "And no." "Explain." "I want to apologize for leaving," she said. "But I also want you to know that leaving didn't solve what I thought it would. It just moved the problem." "And the problem was?" She stopped walking. I did the same. "The problem was that I believed wanting something deeply made me irresponsible," she said. "And I was tired of proving I wasn't." I felt the words land with a quiet, cumulative force. There were things I could say, prepared responses shaped by years of thought. None of them felt adequate. "You wanted more than I could offer," I said finally. "I wanted more than I was willing to admit," she said. "You were simply there." "That's not fair." "No," she said. "But it's accurate." We resumed walking. The rain had begun to thicken, stippling the water's surface. "I'm not asking you to fix anything," she said. "I'm not asking you to re-enter something we already failed at." "Then what are you asking?" "I'm asking you to see me," she said. "Now. Not as the woman who left. Not as the version you've perfected in your absence." I stopped again. This time, she waited. "I don't know if I can do that," I said. She nodded. "That's the most honest thing you've said so far." Margaret, I said, you can't come back into someone's life and ask them to suspend the past. I'm not asking you to suspend it, she said. I'm asking you to stop letting it speak for me. We stood there, rain collecting at our collars. I was aware of the heat of her presence, the careful distance she maintained. Everything between us felt measured, provisional. What happens next? I asked. That depends, she said, on whether you believe the future has any jurisdiction left. I laughed, once, without humor. You always did this. Turn uncertainty into philosophy. And you always forgave it, she said softly. That stung, precisely because it was true. We walked back in the opposite direction, neither of us acknowledging the turn. When we reached the street, she stopped. I should go, she said. I've taken enough. You've taken nothing, I said. She looked at me, then, fully. That's where you're wrong. She leaned in, hesitated, then kissed my cheek. It was brief, almost formal, but it undid me more completely than anything else she might have done. I'll call you tomorrow, she said. I did not answer. She walked away without looking back. That night, I dreamed of a door I had locked years ago, only to discover I had never turned the key. I woke with the sensation of having been careless with something fragile. In the morning, I received an email from the department chair congratulating me on my upcoming retirement. The tone was warm, conclusive. I stared at it longer than necessary. At noon, the phone rang. Daniel, Margaret said, I need to tell you what I meant yesterday. I thought you already had. No, she said. I mean the part one avoided. I waited. I didn't leave because of the job, she said. I left because I was afraid of how much I loved you. The line went quiet. I did not know if she was still there. Daniel, she said. Yes, I said, my voice altered in a way I did not recognize. I'm here. I thought if I said it out loud, it would diminish, she said. Instead it stayed. It just learned how to hide. I felt something give way then. Not collapse, not break, but loosen. As if a structure I had relied on had finally admitted its limits. Come over, I said. She inhaled sharply. Are you sure? No, I said. But I'm willing. There was a pause. Then, I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and stood very still, the house suddenly alert around me. I looked at the door, the table, the chair by the window. Everything seemed to wait. When the knock came, it was soft, deliberate. I crossed the room and opened the door, already aware that whatever followed would not be undone. Chapter 3. She stood in the doorway as if crossing a threshold required permission. Rain darkened the shoulders of her coat. Her hair had escaped the careful order she favored, curling slightly at the temples. For a moment, we simply looked at each other, both aware that this pause would be remembered no matter what followed. Hello, she said. Come in, I said, stepping aside. The door closed behind her with a sound that felt too loud. The house adjusted, as houses do when an unfamiliar presence alters their assumptions. She removed her coat slowly, deliberately, and placed it over the back of the chair by the window. You still have this, she said, touching the fabric. I thought you might have replaced it. I didn't see the need, I said. She nodded, accepting this without comment. Acceptance had always been one of her most disarming traits. We stood in the center of the room, uncertain of the choreography. In the past, there would have been an embrace, a joke, a shared acknowledgement of awkwardness. Now there was only restraint and the fragile dignity it required. I won't stay long, she said. You can, I replied. If you want to. I don't know what I want, she said. That's part of why I'm here. I gestured toward the chairs. We sat opposite each other, knees angled away, an arrangement that felt intentional. The space between us was small, but carefully preserved. You said you were afraid, I said. Yes. Of loving me. I added, though the words still felt provisional. She did not correct me. Of what loving you asked of me, she said, and of what it revealed. Which was, that I wanted to be chosen, she said. Not admired. Not respected. Chosen. The word lingered. It was quieter than I expected. I did choose you, I said. She smiled, gently. You chose me within the life you had already decided to live. And that wasn't enough? No, she said. But I didn't know how to ask for more without feeling like a betrayal of myself. I leaned back, the chair creaking faintly. You could have told me. I know, she said. I told myself you wouldn't understand. That was easier than risking being right. I watched her hands as she spoke. They were steady now, folded loosely in her lap. Whatever she had rehearsed on the way here, she had moved past it. You left without warning, I said. You erased yourself. I thought I was being kind, she said. I thought clarity would hurt less than negotiation. And did it? She shook her head. It just postponed the pain and made it lonelier. Silence settled between us, not hostile but charged. Outside, a car passed, tires hissing on wet pavement. You said on the phone that you loved me. I said, past tense. Her eyes lifted to mine. That wasn't intentional. I felt the room tilt slightly, the way it does when balance is lost, but not yet acknowledged. What are you saying, Margaret? I'm saying I never stopped, she said. I just learned how to behave as if I had. I stood, abruptly, and crossed to the window. The city lights had come on, reflections trembling in the glass. I needed the distance, the pretense of something else to look at. You can't say that, I said. Not like this. I know, she said, but I didn't come to be careful. I turned back to her. Then why did you come? She rose to her feet as well. We were closer now, the careful geometry undone. Because I didn't want the rest of my life to be organized around what I avoided, she said. Because I wanted to know who I am when I stop running. And if who you are wants something you can't have. I asked. She considered this. Then I'll have learned something true. I laughed softly. You make it sound so clean. It isn't, she said. It's terrifying. We stood there, neither of us reaching for the other. The restraint felt deliberate now, chosen rather than imposed. I'm retiring, I said again, as if repeating it might change its meaning. I don't know who I am without the institution propping me up. She studied me. You're someone who notices when things matter, she said. You always have been. That's not enough. It might be, she said, if you let it be. I moved closer, close enough to feel the warmth she carried in from outside. She did not step back. Do you remember the night we argued about Vienna? She asked suddenly. Yes, I said. You wanted to go? I wanted to stay. You said stability was a virtue, she said. That not everything needed to be pursued. And you disagreed. I said desire doesn't diminish because you ignore it, she said. It just becomes sharper. I met her gaze. You were right. Her breath caught. It was the smallest sound, but I heard it. You never said that before, she said. I know. She lifted her hand, stopped midway, then let it fall. The aborted gesture felt intimate, revealing. I don't want to repeat ourselves, she said. I don't want to pretend this is a correction. Then what is it? A reckoning, she said. For both of us. I reached out then, slowly, giving her time to refuse. She did not. My hand closed around hers, familiar and strange at once. This changes things, I said. Yes, she said. That's the point. We did not kiss. That felt important. Instead, we stood there holding hands, the future pressing in from all sides, insistent and unresolved. After a moment, she released me. I should go, she said again. Will you come back? I asked. She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I felt the full weight of what we were attempting. If you ask me to, she said. I did not answer immediately. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city seemed to hold its breath. Come back tomorrow, I said finally. She nodded. Tomorrow, she echoed. At the door, she turned. Daniel, she said. Whatever happens, thank you for opening it. The door closed softly behind her. I remained where I was, the imprint of her presence still warm in the room. That night, I did not dream of doors or locks. I dreamed of standing at a crossroads with no signs. Only the certainty that choosing not to move was no longer an option. In the morning, I woke with a clarity that frightened me. My phone was silent. The house was quiet. And for the first time in years, the future felt less like a concept and more like a demand. Chapter 4. I woke to a sky the color of old steel. The snow had melted into gray puddles on the sidewalks, and the air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and winter decay. My phone sat on the nightstand, silent, as if it too had decided to wait. I stayed in bed longer than necessary, listening to the quiet, counting the seconds it took to breathe fully. By the time I dressed, the city had begun to stir. Cafes opened, bus doors hissed, and students passed my window, wrapped against the lingering cold. I poured coffee, black, the way I liked it, though it tasted thin and unremarkable. The knock came at exactly 9. I hadn't anticipated it, yet I recognized it instantly. She was punctual, always had been. Good morning, I said, opening the door before she could knock again. Good morning, she replied, the scarf around her neck damp from the drizzle. She stepped inside without hesitation, glancing briefly at the framed photographs on my wall, the books lining the shelves, the quiet order of the place. "You've organized this well," she said, almost as an observation, not a compliment. "Habits," I said, "and a fear of clutter." She laughed softly. "I noticed that in you. Even in the years we weren't speaking." We moved to the kitchen, each of us performing small, domestic tasks in silence. I filled the kettle. She washed her hands at the sink. The quiet was familiar but fragile. I could sense it holding back questions neither of us was ready to voice. "I thought about what you said yesterday," I said, breaking the stillness. "About a reckoning." "Yes," she said, drying her hands. "I meant it. What does that look like?" I asked. I asked it cautiously, aware that framing it might limit it. "It's not a plan," she said. "Not an argument to win. Not a decision to enforce. It's acknowledgement. Of time, of fear, of everything we avoided." I nodded slowly. "Acknowledgement. That's manageable." She shook her head. "Manageable isn't the point." I leaned against the counter. "Then what is?" Her eyes lingered on mine, steady and unflinching. "Truth," she said. "Even when it's inconvenient. Even when it hurts." The kettle clicked. Steam hissed as I poured water over the coffee grounds. I realized I was shaking slightly. Not from cold. Not from the walk. From her presence. From the inevitability she carried with her. "You haven't changed," she said suddenly. "You still try to intellectualize everything, even emotion." "I'm trying not to," I said. "But I fail." "You always have," she said. We sipped our coffee in silence. I noticed the way the cup warmed my hands, the bitter aroma filling the space between us. It felt like a buffer against the conversation we both knew was coming. "Daniel," she said finally, "do you remember the afternoon in the library? That moment before everything shifted?" I did. I closed my eyes briefly. "Yes," I said. "I remember exactly." "I remember it differently," she said. "I was terrified. Not of you. Of how much I wanted to be near you." I opened my eyes. "That's the truth, then?" "Yes," she said. "I just didn't know how to admit it." "And you think admitting it now fixes anything?" "No," she said. "But hiding it never did." Her voice carried an urgency I hadn't heard before, one I couldn't ignore. I wanted to respond, to argue, to carefully calibrate my words. But all of that seemed irrelevant in the face of what she was offering. Clarity without compromise. "I'm afraid," I said finally, "of where this might go, of the part of myself I'll have to confront." She nodded, as if she had expected that. "I'm not asking you to be fearless, only to be honest." The city outside continued without regard for us. Buses rolling past, footsteps on wet pavement, the distant hum of construction. Inside, our small kitchen felt suspended, separate from that rhythm. "I don't know if I can do this," I admitted. "You can," she said softly. "We can. But only if we're willing to let the past speak for itself, without letting it dictate the future." Her words were deliberate, careful, and somehow lighter than they should have been. I realized I had been bracing myself for confrontation, for a fight, for recrimination. Instead, she offered recognition, and that was somehow harder to bear. I set my cup down. "I've spent years thinking I could control my life by controlling the narrative," I said. "Turns out I was just avoiding truth." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes searching mine. "We all do that," she said, "until the truth shows up anyway." We didn't speak after that for several minutes. The silence stretched, intimate and uncomfortable. Then she stood. "I should go," she said. I felt it before she moved. The sharp, sudden emptiness her absence would leave. I wanted to ask her to stay. I wanted to say something that would tether her here. "I'll see you this afternoon," I said instead. She paused. "Are you sure?" "No," I admitted. "But I'm willing." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carries both relief and warning. "Then I'll come," she said. When the door closed behind her, the room felt impossibly large and empty. I looked at the chairs, at the counter, at the faint ring where her coffee cup had sat, and realized that even in the absence of motion, the presence she left behind would not let me rest. Later, when I tried to read, the words on the page dissolved into fragments. When I tried to walk, the sidewalk seemed narrower, as if the city itself was aware of what had begun. At 3, the phone rang. I picked up before the second ring. "Daniel," she said, "I need to tell you something before we meet. It's important. It changes everything." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tension beneath. I didn't respond immediately. I felt the words between us, the space we had yet to cross. "Tell me," I said finally. There's someone else, she said. Or there was. And you need to know before we try to undo the past. I felt the room tilt. My stomach tightened. My thoughts fractured into 1,000 half-formed arguments and assumptions. Tell me everything, I said. And she did. By the time she hung up, I realized that the future had arrived, uninvited and uncompromising. There would be no careful steps, only movement, and the consequences we would both have to bear. Outside, the sky had begun to darken, the first hints of evening settling into the city. I stared at the phone for several long minutes, aware that whatever happened next could not be undone. The knock came at exactly 3. If you want, I can write chapter 5, which can take the story into the confrontation and emotional reckoning between Daniel and Margaret, heightening the stakes and tension for listeners. Do you want me to continue in that direction?